2 quick pieces of context and 1 warning right off the bat. 1. I have not played Early Access. Everything I'm about to say is in reference to the game's full release, which I started playing August 25th, 2023. I have included a hypothesis about the game's earlier structure, but this argument stands without it. 2. Yes, I absolutely hate Mizora. No, I probably would not be writing this if I liked her. However, even if I didn't find her completely repellent, I would still see the flabbiness of the writing concerning her. That's what this essay addresses. 3. There are also massive Act 3 spoilers in this, but if you're listening, you've probably already played the game. For a while now, I've been bothered by the weakness of the writing of Wyll's story and certain mechanical choices around his questline, and this feeling has only grown as I've put, frankly, too many hours into this game. He suffers from rewrites late in the process. Fans complained about him in Early Access, leading to his warmer, more noble personality, and having 4 hours less content than Astarion and 2 less than Karlach, who was created later in the process. It's, quite frankly, a load of racist nonsense, and that would have to be addressed before any other fix could work. But there's another raging issue in Wyll's storyline and how it gets handled, and that is Mizora. Where the other companions get compelling, powerful villains who open up meaningful discussion of destructive quests for power and cycles of abuse, Wyll gets a clingy psychosexual nightmare whose capture by the cult of the Absolute reduces her from threatening to irritating, and whose presence in camp and accompanying sex scene in Act 3 invites the player to treat Wyll's 7 years of isolation and manipulation with as little gravity as Larian offers it. Removing Mizora from Baldur's Gate 3 and reworking Wyll's relationship with a new patron would allow for the creation of a tighter story while also addressing a portion of the in-game racism surrounding Wyll. It seems like the only thing Mizora individually brings to the game is her appearance, in more ways than one. Mizora continually dehumanizes Wyll, referring to him as a pup, talking about keeping him on a leash, and otherwise making comments that compare him to a dog. At the same time these comments demonstrate the abusive nature of her relationship with Wyll, they aim to titillate the player. I have no issue with titillation as a concept and salute the other people who view Baldur's Gate 3 as a dating sim with some combat mechanics. However, I'd love if that titillation did not come at the cost of the dehumanization and torture of the only black companion in the game, especially since he repeatedly expresses how much he hates the experience. She's also the only one of the companion's antagonists that you can romance. You can fuck the Emperor, and I would argue he's never truly on the player's side, but you can play your Tav as being fully on his, so that's its own thing. Wyll gets a scene where you roll around on the grass. Mizora gets an extended sex scene despite her having shown up only a handful of times prior to that, the exact number depending on whether you're playing a Wyll Origin run. Despite the scarcity of screen time, she appears on the poster, not Karlach. A friend and I comment sometimes that if Mizora weren't on the posters, she'd have been cut from the game, but I don't think that's entirely true. I mean, it would have raised some questions if she'd vanished from everything, but I don't think they hamstrung themselves quite that thoroughly. Larian could have replaced her with Karlach on the posters, and chose not to. Apparently, they decided that a conventionally attractive devil lady was more useful for marketing than one of the main characters. There's also a possibility that the Gather Your Allies quest starting at the end of Act 2 used to be much more about picking sides, that the Hells were a possible faction, and that Mizora could have become a full companion. Other evidence of this is Cazador's existence, and the amount of unfinished content surrounding him. Where the hell did Lady Incognita go? What does "lie where Cazador lies" mean? Why is Astarion's story so wildly disconnected from every other villain in the game? And the fact that Ketheric Thorm used to be recruitable. When the faction mechanic fell to the cutting room floor, it could easily have taken Mizora with it if not for the hours of work put in, her face on the posters, sheer laziness, shitty rewrites with Wyll based on the racism of fans, and wanting to keep one more thing for the players to fuck. And we can't kill her! Wyll's plotline resolves possibly after the end of the game in a few one-off lines you might not even trigger about how he intends to hunt her down, and you can try to talk him out of it. Imagine for a moment that you could do any of this, the sex scene, the lack of resolution, the persuasion check to get him to give up revenge, with Astarion and his abuser. People would lose their goddamn minds, and for good reason. It's lazy and flies in the face of what BG3 has to say about cycles of abuse, freedom, and power. It is still lazy and incomplete writing that Mizora gets to chill at your camp for almost all of Act 3, and Larian went back in and removed the ability to so much as cast flesh to stone on her. It's, frankly, fucking insulting. While I understand not wanting people to kill her before the half-baked showdown at the Iron Throne, I have to imagine there's already a way to mark in the game whether that quest was completed, which means it should theoretically be possible to limit killing her or otherwise doing violence to her to after that scene. It is possible this change went in to make it so people wouldn't bug out Wyll's romance. I cannot conclusively state that not talking to Mizora after completing the Iron Throne was the source of any bugs preventing Wyll from proposing, but I also cannot rule it out. It is also possible that devs were purely thinking of making it so people could not make the Iron Throne easier by preventing Mizora from showing up to command Baldur. However, none of this would have been necessary if they had just given us a battle with her in-game. And so, intended or not, the effect is that of Larian choosing to just have Mizora hanging around, taking up space, and photobombing screenshots over actually completing Wyll's story. This combines especially badly with how thoroughly he has been shafted up until this point, and how the game gives the player chances to be cruel to Wyll and flirt with Mizora during nearly every scene where she shows up. But I did promise you not just a removal of bad dog jokes and questionable wank fodder. So let's say we had the time, the budget, and the inclination to remove Mizora, but still wanted to save what time and money we could while giving Wyll a complete, coherent story. How might we do that? Raphael. Major spoilers after this point. Raphael's existing narrative beats make him uniquely well-suited to filling the gap that cutting Mizora would leave. From the moment Raphael appears, he wants something from the player, although he refuses to tell them what and strings them along until Act 3 when he informs them he's after the crown of Karsus and the position of Archdevil Supreme. Remember the comment about siding with the Hells from earlier? He's a Cambion, same as Mizora, but his material, plane-shifting the party to Hell in their first meeting, not getting kidnapped by the cultists, having Voss plead for his help, tricking an Orthon, all builds him up as a credible threat. I like to clown on him, but I took him seriously as an enemy for more reasons than his 666 hit points. I argue that a threatening villain makes for a more compelling story than an annoying one. It makes a player feel more powerful in victory and creates more tension leading up to the climax of the conflict. Furthermore, linking Wyll directly to a main antagonist would hopefully make it a little harder for people to choose to ignore him for the entire game. Raphael's involvement with Wyll's backstory makes every bit as much sense as Mizora's. If he has been seeking the crown for 1,000 years, then he would want to prevent any other beings, such as Tiamat, gaining significant amounts of power, explaining why he would oppose the cult of the dragon and offer a contract to Wyll. While I do not believe a flirtatious element is necessary between Wyll and his patron, Raphael is more than capable of providing it. Especially considering how it parallels his later, I swear I'm not just using a buzzword, grooming of Mull in Last Light. It would make apparent what many people seem to have missed, the exploitative nature of warlock pacts. And if you really feel the need to bang Wyll's patron specifically, there's still Harlip, I guess. Finally, Raphael's purchase of a young Gortash would, if he were Wyll's patron, strengthen narrative parallels on that front. Two people with axes to grind with the same devil, and estrangement from their fathers whose approaches to life, power, and morality could not be more different. It's juicy as hell! What about the plot? Raphael has as much need of good soldiers as Zariel, has a reason to want to take one of Zariel's fighters to weaken her, is known to be vindictive and highly personal, see Hope, and would potentially target Karlach specifically because of her past connection with Gortash. Gortash escapes from Raphael, so Raphael takes his former bodyguard. He could still send Wyll after Karlach with the same "she's a devil" justification. Wyll can still try to save Uldr in Act 2, and he would then have an eye on the loot his patron is after. You could also stir up some inter-party drama with Wyll and Karlach being mistrustful about Raphael offering Astarion a deal, allowing further exploration of what the game has to say about freedom and power. Finally, in Act 3, visiting Raphael's House of Hope could be about more than getting the hammer, an option achievable without entering another deal with him. You could steal Wyll's contract, destroy it, and kill Raphael, giving Wyll a complete plot line where he can finally celebrate his freedom. You'd likely have to make some sort of hand-wavy excuse for why Wyll continues to have powers for the rest of the game, but the game, as it is, already does that. You can ask Mizora why Wyll still has powers after you break his pact, and the answer is, frankly, slightly bullshit. In a game where you could, on day one, rebuild Wyll into anything you wanted, oh no, my warlock powers always feels a bit odd as a conflict, even if he stays a warlock. 3. What if he became a hexblade event? This is supposed to be exclusively about Wyll, Mizora, and Raphael. There are other minor tweaks I'd include, making the confrontation about getting Ravengard killed, if that still happens, always occur with Cordula Eltan rather than Floric to stop her characterization getting absolutely massacred, making the Iron Throne less aggravating, dialogue changes, and so on. I would especially want to integrate a point system for Wyll regarding his choice to break or keep his pact, and make sure he could make that decision in Act 3. But the central complaint here was how stunted Wyll's plotline is, while also giving far too much space to a greasy, unimportant wink opportunity. Making Raphael Wyll's patron instead of Mizora would not automatically solve the issue of Wyll having very little autonomy and being dismissed by the fandom. It would, however, strengthen his connection to the overall plot and, by improving his villain, hopefully encourage engagement from those less willing to put in the work to see what a narratively rich character he already is. If you have additional thoughts, let me know. Thank you for listening.